Hello and welcome to the Hitout. This is Zero Hanger's weekly AFL show where we talk about everything that happened in the round past and what's going to happen in the future. This episode is a big one. We talk about the surprise winners on the weekend, the Roos. I was at that game as a D supporter. Not good. Really not a good time. We also talk about when will the first wins come for the winless teams. So, West Coast, Freo, D's. There's a couple of other teams in there that I've forgotten. We talk about the MRO and who would you pick in an AFL restart with pick one. So if you were going to restart the league, who would you pick as your first pick? And I also give my Nuffie rankings for this round. It's a really good one. You're going to want to see this. So big episode. Let's get to it. All right, we are here for the Hitouts. This is our new show. I mean, it's the same show, but just a different name. I'm here with Darren Parkin. Darren, welcome.
Nice to be here. Yeah, another surprise or I guess a tumultuous weekend of footy.
Love it. In Mitch's chair, Aidan Cellini.
Yeah, it feels a bit awkward in this spot here, but I don't mind the promotion, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Mitch is dead. And Callum, Farquhar.
I'm here and I'm looking forward to staying in the same spot this week. So.
Love it. All right, so first thing on the rundown, we are now called the Hitouts. We went through everybody's submissions. Thank you, everybody that sent through names for this show. We didn't use any of the submissions that people sent through, and we came out with the Hitout, which I think, so I've put together a list of every footy show across the three major networks, right? So there's Fox Footy, there's Channel 7, there's AFL.com.au, there's AFL 360, On the Couch, the Midweek Tackle, Bounce, First Crack, the Agenda Setters, Unfiltered, Extra Time, the Sunday Footy Feast, the Wash Up, Kane's Call, AFL Daily, the Round Ahead, the Round So Far, Access All Areas, First Up with Kane Corns, Gettable. Two of those shows have Kane Corns in the title. We are the Hitouts, and I feel like you could exchange any of those names with any of the other ones, and you wouldn't have a difference. You wouldn't notice a difference.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
That's fair enough. They're all, we could chuck the Hitout with Kane Corns if he wants to come in on one day. And everyone will probably think it's on Channel 7. So, yeah, it's probably a good...
You can mention Volcano in there.
Oh, Volcano. Well, that's a segment. I think we should have a Volcano segment to just react to the latest Kane Corns talking point, which there was a lot this week. But this is not a Kane Corns podcast. This is the Hitout. This is a Zero Hanger podcast. I'll move on. First thing, looking at the weekend, so some surprise winners. Darren, Saints. You're a Saints fan?
I am.
What was that?
Well, yeah, we nearly had West Coast have kept going against Brisbane. That would have been the ultimate of the surprise wins if they'd have got them at the Gabba, and they'll probably rue that third quarter when they kicked 1-6. I think it was 8 shots to 7, and their lead sort of got dwindled away when they could have perhaps still been 3 or 4 goals up at three-quarter time. But yeah, I guess the two we look at, St Kilda and North from the weekend. Surprises, yes, but no. If we look at expectations, Geelong expected to finish higher. Geelong coming off a top 4 run, but that's the 4th time St Kilda have beaten Geelong at Marvel in a row, and they generally beat them the same way each time. Sometimes there's just matchups that work for certain teams, and I think it also, St Kilda's expectations coming in were a bit lower based on injuries and losing Josh Battle and some of those things in the off-season. But got to remember they've won 24 games in 2 years. So they're a mid-table side. There's probably a perception that they're a bottom 4 side, and maybe that's not accurate. Maybe they're a side that's sort of still around the mark. Maybe they're at about the level they've been over the last 2 years and haven't necessarily given up too much ground. And Melbourne, good in round 1 against the Giants, but vulnerable given the younger players in their side, and North were always expected to improve. They looked better against a competent Bulldogs side the week before. Probably the surprise in that match was the Avalanche late, where we probably would have thought that would have stayed an arm wrestle, but North blowing that out to their first 10-goal win since the pandemic year in 2020 when they beat the Adelaide Crows, who looked like going winless through that season. So, yeah, it's been a while since North got hold of someone, and that's a big result.
Which one do you think is more surprising, out of those two?
I'd probably say the North one, just because of the how much they won by. They sort of you haven't really seen that from North for a long time, where they've actually put the pedal to the metal and sort of just taken the game away from someone. So I think that's a good sign of their maturity, and I've said a couple times in this podcast that we've expected them to actually win some games. So it's good to see that they've actually finally come along in that sense.
Yeah. Well, I had Saints. Famously, I tipped Saints for the spoon this year as opposed to Richmond. But what did you make of those surprise winners?
I think it was more from the Geelong aspect. They were so good the week before against the Dockers, putting them to the sword for the majority of that match. So I have them, as in Geelong, winning the flag. That was my early season tip. And what they put up in the first half against the Saints was pretty deplorable. Obviously, they brought it back to almost level pegging and got themselves back into the contest. But I think too little too late in the end.
It's amazing the roller coaster of the year. I mean, you started the year, Collingwood lose to the Giants by about 9 goals, and they win by about 100 points a week later. Port lose that game by about 100 to Collingwood. Admittedly, they played Richmond, who were quite young, but belted them. Melbourne, highly competitive against a flag fancy, and then lose by 10 goals to a side that, you know, have been in wooden spoon contention for a while. So it's been a very yo-yo-y type start to the year.
I feel like the start of the year is always kind of like that,
Yeah.
where teams adjust, especially now that you have, you know, opening round where you have teams that have played 3 games, some teams have played 2 games, and, you know, you need at least a game to sort of get into the swing of things. For me, obviously the D's one was the most upsetting. So I was at this game. I actually made the trek down to Marvel as a D's fan.
Oh, no.
And it
Which they don't
was,
normally do.
in terms of game day experience, I was actually quite pleasantly surprised. So I went the first half. I sat up in the stands. I was like basically the second row from the back, and like, of course, I'm a D's fan, so I haven't been to Marvel in a very long time to actually watch a game. I think last year I did go to a game at the Medallion Club, but that doesn't really count. That's like a pretty, that's a nice experience. But as an actual fan, I watched that first half and I was like, you know what? This is a good experience from a game point of view. Obviously not from a fan point of view as a D's fan. So I decided at halftime to go to the media box. Have you been to the media box at
Not
Marvel?
Marvel, no.
Very good. And obviously by that point, I'd given up on the D's. So I'm like, I'm just going to enjoy this game from a North Melbourne perspective. But then I got distracted by the Champion Data guys. Have you ever been in the media box with the Champion Data guys?
Yeah, wizards.
That is unreal. This just blew my mind because they're like the amount of things that rely on those Champion Data guys, like the live stats. And it turns out it's just like one little boy with binoculars just calling the play-by-play, being like Cherry hit out, LDU gather, that kind of thing. Did you know that? It's all like 4 people?
Yeah, and then they have different people back sort of computing those stats. So you might have one guy who's doing only stoppages, one guy who's doing only disposals and only scoring. And it's a remarkable... You need to be a very good play-by-play to just constantly be...
Yeah, and it just blew my mind because one guy, clearly, like, you've got to have a certain type of brain for that, like very, bird watching, spectrum-y kind of brain. But like he just knew every player, every action, and he was just calling it. Like it just blew my mind because like that is harder to me than commentating or playing the player. As like you're a commentator, so you would know how hard that is. But
and if you're a commentator and you get the player wrong, so be it. Like you might look like a goose, but like if you say LDU's handballed it, but it's Simpkin, whatever. North have still got the ball, but obviously Champion Data have to absolutely nail that.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are times where it needs to be corrected afterwards, but they're under more pressure probably.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the Champion Data guys at work?
I've heard about them.
Yeah.
They're kind of a mystery to me, a bit of a myth, but the way you're describing them, it sounds like they do a phenomenal work.
It was unreal. And like it actually helped me emotionally to just focus on that instead of watching the D's get absolutely belted by a bunch of, I guess they're not 18-year-olds anymore, but a lot of 18-year-olds.
Just about.
Green
so
calculators.
that was my match day experience. And then I left it with 10 minutes to go.
Wise decision.
So anyway, shout out to the Champion Data guys. You improved my game day experience. So if anyone wants to come on the podcast, invitation's open. Good?
I reckon let's do it, yeah.
Cool. All right. Next thing on the rundown. When will the first wins come for the 5 winless sides, Aidan? So West Coast, Freo, Essendon, Melbourne, Carlton, all winless. When's the next win coming? Please tell me.
Well, for starters, no one probably tipped Carlton and Fremantle to be there still at this stage. But for the 2 WA sides in the derby this week, one will have to win, you'd think. I mean, there's a possibility of a draw still. And sometimes these games can be close and a bit fiery. So wouldn't be surprised if both teams get themselves up for it. But you'd have to say, just given on paper, the Dockers, but again, we know West Coast kind of surprised all last year with one of the 2 wins in the derby last year. I think Melbourne might still suffer a little bit of pain. They've got the Suns this week at the G before Geelong, and the Bombers. So that could be an interesting watch, as well as Essendon, who've got Port and then the bye. So they could be, 3-3, and then have that week off and really kind of sit in that disappointment at the start of the year, which they haven't obviously shown thus far. And then you got Carlton as well, who could potentially look at an 0-4 start before they face the Eagles, because they got the Dogs and the Pies to come in the next couple of weeks. So as we've seen, and as Darren mentioned before, it's a bit of a yo-yo season to begin with. You kind of expect the unexpected. You never know what's going to come around the corner. But for these teams, they might need to get a move on, especially those that thought they were contenders prior to the year beginning, to start getting on the board. Otherwise, they could be left well and truly far behind.
We might never win again.
No, I reckon you guys are going to beat Gold Coast this week. I think we've learned from the start of the season that you can't really just take one game on face value. Melbourne at the MCG, which is where the game against Gold Coast will be this week, they took it right up to the Giants, who we all assume will be up there contending this year. So maybe last week was a once-off. Maybe they're not used to Marvel Stadium like a lot of their fans are. So I think...
Shots fired.
So I think that... and Gold Coast have been, average away last year. Of course, they beat West Coast, but again... Are West Coast, better because they beat Brisbane, or are they still quite poor? Or is that just a once-off they fired up after a big loss? So we still don't really get a full grapple hold about where Gold Coast sit in away games. So I think Melbourne could potentially get it done, and I think I might back them. But that's what I'm thinking there.
Big test for the Suns. That obviously their only 2 away wins last year came right at the end after the siren against the Bombers, and then they beat Richmond, who won the spoon. Derby's fascinating. Freo have actually lost 6 in a row, but they've led 5 of those 6 games at three-quarter time. They lost their last 4 last year and their first 2 this year, but have been right in all of those games, Fremantle. So obviously that's extremely disappointing that they're sort of finding ways to lose. You look late last year when they played Essendon, they were about 4 goals up. Against the Giants, they hit the front in the last quarter, and a couple of the Port game where they were playing for a spot in the 8 at the end of the year. And then obviously they got belted last week, but certainly in the game against Sydney, they were in front for probably 85-90% of it. So they're just finding ways to lose without necessarily playing poorly. And West Coast won the first derby last year by plenty, like 8 goals or something. So
that was a Harley Reid game.
Yeah.
Every West Coast game is a Harley Reid game, but I remember that as his like a rival.
It's a huge danger game for Freo, based on what West Coast dished up against the Lions.
Yeah, there's a good chance that Melbourne 0-4. Sorry, I keep going back to days, but we could be 0-4 to start this season. And then that, I know that Simon Goodwin has escaped a lot of, we've gotten through a lot with Simon Goodwin. He did win a premiership. But then if we get to that 0-4 stage, that is bad. That is maybe calling for Simon Goodwin's head and actually considering it. Because I know he has a good relationship with everybody at the top level, but you can't really deny an 0-4 start.
Yeah, and you wonder whether, because obviously Melbourne have had a lot of other storylines in the last few years, Petrarca and Oliver and, other situations, Joel Smith, that as much as that has put some pressure on Goodwin, maybe there's been a lot of other side stories. And yeah, sooner or later it becomes the focus of, well, now there's the on-field results.
Yeah.
How do we, that has to stop somewhere.
And even lately with the Max Gawn post-match, again, just another, although it is a non-story and it will be a non-issue, it will be squashed quite quickly, you think, from the club and from Goodwin. It's just another distraction, another thing detracting from what Melbourne need to do, which is focus on field. And I'm sure you're probably sick of hearing about all these other sorts.
It was just so unnecessary.
It just seems like one thing after, it's almost self-imposed, some of these things.
Yeah.
Which, with proper, mediation and preparation, they'll be able to avoid. But seemingly they continually put themselves in this position where they have to field all these types of questions and answer stuff that they shouldn't have to, as opposed to just focusing on, the 100 minutes on a Saturday.
Well, the weird thing about that particular incident is that, Simon Goodwin, and you've watched a lot of his presses, he gives you nothing. He's the most media-trained coach out there. He doesn't really, it's very vague things that he says. But then that one in the post-game press, obviously post a loss to North, emotions are running high. You want he had the best of intentions, but that was just a real, I think a lot of people have said it's a real own goal.
Just opened up a can of worms.
Yeah.
That was just unnecessary. Just keep that genie shut in the bottle, mate. Just keep it away.
It was an easy answer to just say, Jerry was nearly all Australian last year. He's a star. Look, sometimes you lower your colours to players, and he's clearly a very good ruckman. So
well, he did say that. Then he just kept going. So you've answered the question. Just don't give the media more. Because
Simon, please stop. All right. Well, there's. I mean, what about the Bombers then? So they don't look great. They still kicked 100 points, but.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's their midfield's going all right. They're winning the clearances against Hawthorn, and then their forward line can hit. They've got the young talents up there. It's just the defense that's the worry at the moment. They've got the worst, the most points scored against them, and that's including teams that have already played 3 games. So they're already getting smashed around the ball and stuff like that. Not around the ball, getting smashed on the scoreboard. So it's that's something they've really got to amend going into this.
Looked at it last year when we did their season review back end of last year. I mean, Channel 9 expanded on the stat yesterday. They put a graphic out that since 2005, which is the start of the non-finals victory drought, I guess, the Bombers have only had a top 8 ranked defence once in 20 completed seasons. So they've played finals a few times in there, and I think their attack has been ranked top 8 9 times during that period, but only once their defence. And I think last year we looked at their stats that they were very, very good at scoring from forward half stoppages and very good at keeping the ball in their forward line. But every time it got out, they conceded a score. So if you got through whatever their defensive system was in the middle, you would just score every time. So they just can't plug those holes. And there's always the other side to it. Credit to the Crows, who are looking very slick in the early part of the year. And
then obviously there's the big signing of Ben Mackay. I was just thinking that as you were saying that, who was their big name defender before Mackay? I can't name any.
Oh, Cale Hooker, but he was a bit of a swing man.
Hurley, same swing man as well.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that, but they have not had a good defense for a very long time. But they'll probably beat us at gather round and jump back.
I think more from a Bombers standpoint, it's the system as well that's letting them down. You can watch behind the goals vision, and there's no handovers, there's no communication between the 2 back thirds of the ground. The forward 6, as we've alluded to, are quite strong, and they continually impress. With maybe some of the entries that they do receive, but between the back 6 and the mid 6, there's no cohesion at all, which is why they look almost like witches' cones out there. And you saw, especially on the weekend, Adelaide players just popping up in loads of space where they'd be, uncontested marks throughout the ground. So there's definitely a lot that Brad Scott will need to fix up if they're going to try and knock off this winless start.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is that's some grim viewing for those 5 teams, but that'll change next week. And then, I'm going to tip Freo to finally get their win against West Coast. But moving on now, Callum. So MRO Overview, Dangerfield.
Yep, so that one was a really interesting one, wasn't it? It was against St Kilda. He was running towards Ryan Burns, and he sort of flung out an arm at him, and it clipped him on the shoulder, and then it slipped up high and hit him in the head. Burns wasn't concussed, which I think is quite the interesting point from this one, because if he had been concussed, how would it have been graded? It was graded careless conduct, low impact, and high contact, which was just a fine. It was a pretty hefty fine. It was about $6,000 or something like that. So the largest fine of the round. Pennies to him, of course. But I think that's what the big issue is with the MRO. Some people find it quite outcome-based, and I just think that if Burns was concussed, it could have been the same force, same action. Maybe Burns could have been more prone to concussion. He receives a concussion. Does that mean Dangerfield's low impact is graded to high impact and he misses 1 to 2 weeks? So I think that was quite the interesting debate, and a lot of people were a bit, up and about the decision over the weekend.
I think they've kind of put themselves into a bit of a tiff here, the MRO, as in the matrix that they've developed. So as Cal was saying, if Burns does get knocked out and concussed and misses, at least 12 days of football, the category of the incident would go from, negligible impact to almost severe because of the outcome, which means then could be reported for 3 weeks or suspended, for 3 weeks. But because he's not, therefore the impact is negligible or even low, which means it could even be a fine or maybe put around the fine. But there's no kind of real medium ground, which means although the action they're trying to get out, and maybe it wasn't his intent to get him in the head because it did slip up. He then should still be at the mercy of that outcome of the action, not necessarily the result of the reportable offence, which somehow now he's, although Will dodged and maybe rightly so in some aspects, but if Burns were to be concussed, then it jumps from 0 weeks and a fine to immediately 3 weeks, which you'd think most clubs would probably contest.
Well, I feel like we've been talking about this for years. It's like, do you punish the action or do you punish the outcome? And it always seems to be they punish the outcome.
Yeah.
Like Rory Lobb punched Cox in the face, and granted he got off. Like they didn't even consider that because the action was he was essentially just going to spoil the
football act.
Yeah, which was the right outcome. But then you get cases like this all the time where it's it's like the action was bad, but no one got hurt. So also your Dangerfield. So
well, it brings it back to the Archer case last week. Like if Rory Lobb was a football act, how is going for the football not also a football act, and it's an accident? Yeah, and then therefore Archer should get off maybe. So again, that's where they sort of get stuck in a bit of a contradictory sort of way of their rulings.
Yeah. I mean, it was obvious that Archer's intent was to go in low at the ball. It was a bit cannonball-y, the way he approached it, but the same thing, there's nothing sinister, there's nothing strictly speaking illegal about what he's trying to do. It's just come under that banner of reckless. And with Dangerfield, I mean, I read the AFL had a bit of a ruling at the start of the year that no head-high contact could be graded as low impact. So obviously that's a contradiction already.
So classic AFL.
Yeah, that's not the first time they've sort of swung around on that front.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, just continually no consistency, I think, which is what, even players themselves throw their arms like, what are we meant to do? How are we meant to, even coaches, how are they meant to train or coach their players to, I guess, conduct themselves on a field, which already so far in the early parts of this year, we've already seen multiple instances. It's
every year. Like I'm having this argument every year. Oh, well, I mean, not really an argument because everybody agrees. There's absolutely no consistency. How are we still arguing? I mean, we're arguing with the AFL and they just don't seem to change anything. But sorry, you were going to go Mason Redmond?
Yeah, looking at Mason Redmond, I'm not sure if you guys saw the incident, but I was pretty curious on everyone's thoughts. So, of course, during the preseason, there was those few nudges into oncoming traffic in marking contests, which resulted in a couple concussions. This was a bit different. Redmond sort of tunneled Thilthorpe under the ball when he was taking the mark. He landed pretty hard, but it's still similar in the sense, like the duty of care in a marking context, whether to fly up for the ball in that situation when he's not really anywhere near it. Redmond got a fine for that one, but I think the AFL was sort of saying that incidents might get suspensions now for those sort of duty of care things in marking contests. I was just curious to see what everyone's thoughts were on that incident.
Yeah, I think in the pre-season, it's another thing where the AFL can sometimes be a tiny bit slower to react, where we saw the case when West Coast played Richmond it wasn't an official practice match, the match trial. Had it been an official practice match, they might have done it a little bit differently. That was when young Sam Lawler was injured and missed a few weeks, where they didn't take that. That could have been a time where they send the video of that or send a memo to clubs and say, this will be suspended if we see this again. And similar in the sort of tunnelling situation, where if they just sit there and say, okay, we don't like that, we haven't seen it for a while, we've seen it now, but if we see it again, this is what we're going to do. And I think too often they do that. Then it creates that inconsistency because 3 times they don't penalise it, then all of a sudden they do. It's just another one of those ones where I think they're a little bit slow on the reaction.
Sort of a side note to that. So does that mean the practice matches that are not official trial matches, are they treated differently by the MRO?
I think they're...
could you punch someone in a practice match and get away with it?
Blatantly illegal actions, they would take a hard line. It's something that was a grey area where you're a little bit late and you push someone into a contest and it would normally be a free kick, but the player gets hurt and they've got to make some sort of judgment call on whether that's now reportable. We haven't seen a lot of that before. I think if it's an official practice match, they'd probably, when more eyes are watching, it's televised, it almost forces their hand a little bit. In that sort of stuff, they're like, maybe they're just a bit rusty in the pre-season. We'll see if that happens again. And then we saw I think it was Mitch Owens against Port Adelaide at Moorabbin, which he missed round 1 as a result of that. And there were a couple of others as well that, they probably let that get away from them.
I'll just bring it back to, what do you expect the players to do? And it should be based on, is it reasonable conduct? Some of them, admittedly, it's pretty black and white. You probably shouldn't be doing that, therefore you should be punished. But maybe just touching on the Archer, what do you expect him to do? He's been told and coached to come forward at the ball in an aggressive nature, obviously relatively controlled in some aspects. But, if you're telling him not to contest the ball, and same with some of these other players, if you're telling him not to do it, then you almost strip the essence of the game and the fabric of the game from the weekends, which is clearly why a lot of fans keep rocking up to come watch these football games.
Yeah, I have a feeling we'll be talking about the MRO every week for the rest of time. Moving on now, so this is one that Mitch came up with, and then about 4 hours later, Fox Footy posted it on their socials. But we're going to do it anyway.
Have you found the bug in the wall somewhere?
No, but we know who it is. It's ex Azura Hango rider. JJ initials. We're not going to call him out directly, but we know what you're doing, mate. Anyway, so if you were to restart the AFL, so everybody gets back into the draft pool, who do you pick with your number one? Obviously, this is off the back of Nick Dacos and Sam Darcy having absolute blinders of the game this weekend. So who or what type of player would you draft in an AFL restart as pick number one?
I'll go Sam Darcy, and it's probably shocking from me being a Pies supporter, but I think he does things, and Scott Pennebury said it not long after that match as well. He'll do things that no one will ever see before, and I think he's already starting to. He's looking at key defenders that have been around for 5, 10, 15, well, not 15 years, but 10 years, and just going, you know what, I've got you covered after 30 games, and a bit of a injury history as well. So his stretch, his athleticism, he's got both sides of his body in terms of both foot and hand that some players have been in the system for years don't even have yet. So I think, although in terms of between Nick and Sam, I think Sam would be more of the focal point because you can build a team around that. Not saying you couldn't with Nick, but I think the multitude of positions that Sam can play. I mean, he did play, I think, defence when he was a junior as well. And been 208 centimetres, you can probably chuck him in the ruck, and he's proven forward. So I think just his versatility more so would be player number one on my team.
I reckon once you've seen them, absolutely. Where it gets difficult, I think, is the bravery of recruiters' key position versus midfield. So midfielders like Nick Dacos, you kind of look at them before the draft as being bomb-proof, where you're almost certain that that'll work. Yeah. You're almost certain that they'll come in and they'll star. Darcy looks good in Coach Talent League, but I'd suggest key forwards or key position players would be about 50% strike rate in the early part of drafts in terms of getting to where they want to get to. So it's interesting. I reckon if you looked at it now and you know that Darcy is a gun and keeps getting better, you'd be like, yep, we can build a team around that. But I reckon if neither of them had played AFL and you're a recruiter, you'd be like, oh, I reckon Dacos will definitely work. That's safe.
Yeah.
And they'll probably go down that path.
That style of player.
Yeah.
Especially.
That's what I was going to say as well. If you're talking about, what they are right now, maybe you'd go Sam Darcy because you know the talent that he is. But he's touted like as a unicorn player. He can do everything. But these unicorn prototypes of players are so variable. Essendon's Nick Cox sort of had that same title when he came in and he was a top 10 pick or something like that. And he sort of failed to live up to that hype, and he hasn't really developed into that, really versatile, crazy, agile player, athletic player that everyone thought that he could be. When you got Dacos, he's already come in. Everyone knew what they were going to get from him, but he's come in and he's delivered that because it's just as you said, like bomb-proof selection.
Well, I think a lot of it does come down to, as well as how good is your development of young players, because Nick Cox gets drafted to, say, Collingwood, probably would have done a little bit better. Like, or Jack Watts gets sent to West Coast, he probably would have done better than what he ended up with. But speaking of, my pick would be Harley Reid, just based on, obviously it's a sure thing, Harley Reid, Nick Dacos, whatever, but out of those hard midfielders, he's got the pace on the outside. But aside from all that, Harley Reid is so much more marketable. He makes headlines like no other kid we've ever seen. He's given the finger, changing his Instagram display picture to Ben Cousins. That's who you want to build a team around. Nick Dacos, sure thing, but he's boring in terms of, he's like a tracker. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to make a food TikTok account, whatever. Harley Reid, he's doing all the right things and he's making headlines and he's marketable as, he's got that many sponsorships. He's got more sponsorships than the actual West Coast team, I'm pretty sure. So that's who I'm picking as my number one pick in an AFL
I'm pretty
Restart.
probably biased in that St Kilda had an example where they obviously could have taken McCartan or Petrarca, and obviously they felt the need in terms of key position. Now, that was a little bit unlucky because McCartan got all the concussions, but it's probably difficult to forecast that he was going to have the influence that Petrarca ended up having. So those tall, dynamic, game-breaking midfielders, so you look at Petrarca and Bontempelli, both of which should have been drafted by St Kilda, were as probably the examples of those type of guys.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and then other ones in that, I mean, Mac Andrews sort of falls into that. He's sort of in between a Nick Dacos and a Sam Darcy, because he's like, you can really put him anywhere.
Yeah,
But like I don't think he was a sure thing when he was drafted either.
He was meant to go to Melbourne too.
Well, you bring that up.
Side note. But yeah, no, he's got all the attributes to be a star and will be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's almost, barring injury, which no one hopes for these young stars in particular, you'd assume that, he's going to be probably the best player in the next couple of years.
I don't know. There's a couple of players that are being touted as the next best player for the next 10 years. I think we're in a good spot.
Also, topic without notice, just while we're on Dacos and Darcy.
Okay.
Gee, this has really thrown you, hasn't it? Because it's not on the run sheet. The father-son discussion. It's been kind of thrown up, the inequities of the game. Is it unfair that certain clubs potentially get more so than others?
This is a good one to bring up with Darren, because Tasmania, they've brought in the father-son thing for Tasmania. Famously, Nick Riewoldt has 3 sons, I believe.
Yeah.
They're probably all going to be superstars, and they don't have to go to St Kilda now.
But obviously St Kilda, with Roo being a 300 gamer, have that chance, but Tasmania also get that chance, because obviously they don't have any players yet to have father-son. So if you're born there, like I know Matthew Richardson, if he had sons, or Alistair Lynch, if he had sons, Jack Riewoldt, etc. Look, it's inequitable, but it's not necessarily unfair, because it's just it comes down to luck of the draw. There's no rule that says Collingwood or Geelong or the Bulldogs will automatically have a better father-son record. It's just circumstantial that Liberatore and Scarlett and Ablett and Dacos and Moore and all of these players, that it just happens to go that way. But yeah, like there's a lot of inequities in the AFL. I think that's just one of many. So
Yeah, I don't know. I like it. I like the tradition of it. I think it's quite unique. I think it's a good part of our game. But I don't know, if Cooper Hodge chooses Brisbane over Hawthorn, then I might set it off.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, I like it. My only gripe with St Kilda is that we just don't have any. That's no one's fault.
Yeah.
We just don't. So.
There was a photo of, was it Montagna, Hayes and Riewold's son? So that would have got Saints fans a little bit excited. Hopefully. Yeah. Keep the lid on it, but still.
Somewhere down the track. Yeah.
My favourite thing about the father-son thing is that in the AFL, and pretty much all industries at the moment, everybody's screaming about how bad nepotism is. But the father-son rule in the AFL is like the only time we're like, that rocks. That's so good. I love nepotism. Anyways, all right. So last thing before we get to our tips for the week. This is a new segment. I brought this in. This is my Nuffie rankings. I know that we have the MVP and the rookie rankings and the... Are we doing power rankings? No.
Yeah, recruit power
rankings this year?
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to do a rankings, and I feel like nobody has allowed me to do a ranking. So I'm just... Because I'm in charge of the rundown, I'm going to do my own rankings. So this is the Nuffie rankings so far as of this round. So I split it up into 4 tiers. There's 4 tiers, right? So, and this is business as usual, good vibes, bad vibes, and peak Nuff. Right? So we're going to start with business as usual. So there's 4 teams in business as usual. Collingwood, nothing too different about them right now. They stole a win. Everybody hates them. They stole it via the umpires. That's business as usual for Collingwood. Geelong, they lost. Doesn't really matter. They're going to be fine. Nobody's overreacting to that. Western Bulldogs, that's business as usual. That loss. Bevo's still under scrutiny. Players want to leave. There's injury. There's chaos, but they're still a fun team to watch. That is Western Bulldogs every year for the past 10 years. Port Adelaide, they won at home after a whole week of Ken speculation. So that is business as
The
usual.
epitome of Port Adelaide
Very
right
good
there.
start with the
Thank you.
Nuffie rankings. I enjoyed that.
Right, so that's bottom. That's bottom. Good vibes. So all these teams, there's not much to say, but they're all good vibes. They're vibing with the lid firmly on. Hawthorn, Adelaide, GWS, Gold Coast, St Kilda, Sydney. There's not too much to say about them yet. We don't know enough, but
Sydney
the lid's on.
just got themselves in there. They were nearly zipping 3.
Yeah, like that could have been very different.
That could have been bad vibes.
Yeah, no, good vibes. Richmond, I think, is still throwing off good vibes.
Yeah.
Like they're bad, but it doesn't really matter. They're just happy to be there.
Just having fun.
Yeah. I've also put Tasmania into good vibes because their mascot is just weird as hell, but everyone's embraced it.
Yeah, what is
I
that?
loved it. It was great.
Tigers
It's
will
like-
ride that Carlton win, obviously over the arch rivals for a while. That'll give them good vibes for
Yeah,
for
they
a
got
bit of
good
time.
vibes pretty much
Yeah,
for the rest of the year.
That'll give them good vibes.
Bad vibes. Freo. Like, they'll come good eventually, but right now, vibes are bad. Not much else to say about them. Also, Essendon, bad vibes.
Yep.
Don't have a lot of positive things to say about them, but they just need to pray that Zach Merritt never gets injured because that is the only thing that is keeping that club together. All right, so peak Nuff levels. And this is if your club and fan base are being as dramatic as like Married at First Sight. So this is where we're at.
Jeez, that's up there.
Yeah. and it's for either side. So Adelaide, I think, are at peak Nuff levels right now. If you saw, like I spend a lot of time online, as you can probably tell, their lid is off after beating...
Flag com.
Yeah, exactly. They're back to like 2016-17 levels of
What if they kick
Nuff.
50 goals or something?
Yeah, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. North, also at peak Nuff levels, and it's
yeah.
going to last about 4 weeks, but I haven't seen, like, I was at their game, obviously, and that was the first time I've, like, seen that many North supporters, but they were all going off their Nuff, and it was unreal.
If anyone deserves peak enough.
Just on that, I had 2 good mates who are avid North fans, and they went there on Sunday night. I don't think they've gotten home yet. And it's Tuesday as we're filming, so I think, in terms of peak Nuff levels,
it's
you're right.
unbelievable. Like, and I'm so happy for them. Peak Nuff levels. Melbourne, probably, and like Melbourne fans aren't actually that loud, like at games or just in general on social media. This is the first time they've actually come out of the woodwork, and it's to, scream at the players going down the race, which I thought was bad enough, but that's peak Nuff levels for Melbourne, like relatively. And then obviously Carlton.
Oh, yeah.
Absolute Nuff peak levels, and they're going to be there all year. I almost put them in the business as usual category because they're always
Let's do
Nuffies,
this.
but the difference is, like, at the moment they have so much expectation. They have a Brownlow medalist, Coleman medalist. You've probably heard all the clips from Talkback and everything this week. Just absolute peak Nuff levels, and I'm all for it.
Did you hear the one from Vietnam? I think they had the post where they write the love notes or whatever. In Vietnam.
I've seen it.
And the guy wrote a message to Vossi saying, "Please develop a game plan." So even in Vietnam, they're peak nothing.
Their Nuff levels are international. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's something like that going on in the ISS. And that is peak Nuff levels, vibes, rankings for this week.
That was a great segment, by the way.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
It needs to be a rolling one every week.
That was very well thought through,
I spent a good 20 minutes putting it together, and I thought it was worth it.
and it shows.
Yeah. All right. Tips.
Ooh.
Okay.
We're going off last week's, or are we going straight into what now is round 3?
Well, yeah, round 3.
Round
So
3.
Thursday night, we'll go around the table, starting off with Essendon Port. Darren.
Essendon will be better because they have to be. But Port will learn a bit from that trip to Melbourne a couple of weeks ago. I know it's Marvel, not the G, but Port will win.
Yep, Port.
Yeah, Port.
Yeah, the defense is just too much of a worry for me, so I'm going to back Port in as well.
Yep. Potentially game of the round. Friday night, Carlton back on Earth, man. They're just getting stuffed with the Thursday, Friday nights. Getting embarrassed in front of the whole country every week. So, yeah.
Yeah, Dogs have shown more than Carlton. Carlton better last week, but Dogs just.
Yeah, I'll got the Dogs.
Yeah, Dogs are starting to get some troops back. I think Liam Jones is going to come back. I think James O'Donnell as well. So, Dogs for me.
Yeah, Dogs for me as well.
Easy. D's Gold Coast at the G.
I agree with what was brought up earlier. I think Melbourne, until the Gold Coast win at the G, the D's for mine.
Yeah, it's going to be close. Luckily, I'm not going to be... I think I'm going to miss this game, so I'm going to go D's.
I want to go Suns. Hardwick has said it at his time at Richmond as well, and even at his brief 12 months at Gold Coast, that he hates Marvel. He gets his, famous G where he won two of his 3 premierships at the Tigers. So, and he's got them in good shape. I know it's only very, very early in the year, but I think with the loss that Melbourne put up on Sunday,
Yeah. We're not a team that bounces back very well.
No. And again, there's just too much external noise, too many answers of things that have no bearing on what happens on a Saturday afternoon. So I think Gold Coast are razor focus at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to back Melbourne. I think that they've got... let me rephrase that. I just think that we shouldn't I'm not going to base it off one loss. I think this year's shown that you shouldn't base it off one loss. So I'm hoping that they'll bounce back.
Yeah. Me too. St Kilda Tigers.
Little banana peel for the Saints, but they should hopefully be able to ride the momentum from last week.
It would be a very Saints loss if they lost this, but I'm backing the Saints.
Reluctantly, St Kilda. They've literally shown both sides of the coin of what they can produce in the first 2 weeks. So I'm interested to see what they get. But I think they'll be on top at the end of the game.
I think at Marvel, it's hard to go past them.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I think they're building a little bit of a fortress there, or at least they're just going to be flat track bullies there. So I think I'm going to back the Saints. They're quite impressive at that ground.
Yep. Brisbane Geelong at the Gabba. Good one.
The flag unveiling, or as it was supposed to be earlier in the year, this was supposed to be opening round. Brisbane for mine.
Yep.
Yeah, Brisbane.
Yeah, Brisbane here as well.
Actually, no, sorry. This is game of the round.
I was going to say you didn't scroll down enough.
No, I did not scroll down enough.
Although, look where it's played, though. It's a bit disappointing.
And a night
Giants.
game, too.
Yeah,
night game in Lonnie. That's interesting.
Have they ever done that?
They did
Do they have lights down there?
North played a Friday night game in Hobart against Richmond one year. But I don't know whether Hawthorn have done it.
I don't think night game, those late Sunday arvos where the lights are on, the yellow footies are out, but I don't think specifically for the night. So
maybe once against the Saints, 2018-ish, maybe, but can't say that for sure. What a game. Hawthorn won this fixture last year by, I think, 3 points. Bleeding their way just. Yeah.
I'm going to go the Giants, actually. I'm just based solely on I don't want to back Hawthorn. Sorry. And it's 260 points on zero hanger tipping.
Yeah, a bit of value there for the Giants, but this actually is a very tough one. I'm going to go Hawthorn purely just because venue.
Yeah, I'm going to go Hawthorn as well because of the venue. If I wasn't a Hawthorn fan, maybe I would lean into the value, but I can't really tip against them, so I'm going to back them in.
Yeah. Adelaide Roos.
North riding high, but Crows are flying.
Yeah. Is that Adelaide Oval? So I reckon that's going to be Adelaide by 70.
Yeah, Crom for 6+ goals.
Yep. Crows are on a roll, and North fans are probably not even going to notice if they lose after this week. So they're probably still too busy celebrating. So I reckon Crows will just get it done.
And another game in the round, the derby at Optus Stadium. I am going to go Freo, but I think it could be the spiciest game in the round.
Freo extremely vulnerable in that game, but I think they'll just scrape home.
I was always taught by my old man in these type of clashes, the derbies, the SA teams as well. You always pick the underdog for some reason, and if you look through the history book, sometimes the bookmakers will always get it wrong. So for that case, I'm going to choose the Eagles, not confidently, but just a spanner in the works there. And it's got some value there with 400 points on zero hanger tipping.
Yeah, I'm going to go Fremantle, just purely off the vibes, as you say. I think they're too good to go 0-3. I'd be pretty concerned if they were. I don't know what Justin Longmuir's case would be like if they go 0-3, especially to the West Coast as well. So that's an interesting one if that happens. But,
I mean, it's similar to last year, I think.
Yeah.
Similar time, I think that first derby came.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is the tips and the episode for this week. Anything else to plug? What's going on at Zero Hanger, mate?
Oh, gee, not much. There's a lot going on. Obviously, all the news, MRO injury stuff, updating. Callum and I and Mitch will look after, obviously Darren as well. But yeah, keep in touch with zerohanger.com and for everything that you need on AFL.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks, boys. See you next week.
Cheers. See ya.